between 2 weeks and 3 weeks to ferment fully in order to kind of get everything down right. So
we'll be coming back in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome. Right. So that's a bit. I'll just talk to you about what we need to do first, and then we kind of get on with it. These boiling kettles here that are upside down, they need to be sanitized. We have some sanitation liquid here. This will dissolve your skin, so don't touch it with your bare hands. We have gloves here. It's a purple hue. It needs to be mixed 1 to 20 with water. And we put them in the boiler and run them through the pumps because there might be a slight organic compound in there and stuff that we need to flush out. Don't be alarmed if it changes color. On exposure to organic compounds, it changes from purple to green, which is a good way to see once everything gets through and it's still purple, then you know you're clean. I don't expect us to be able to do that now, but it'll still be active as a disinfectant while it's still green, even if it changes to green, because there's a lot of chloride in this stuff. It basically kills any organic.
This is okay with stainless.
Sorry?
This is okay with stainless.
Yes. It's the same thing we use for beer line planing.
Right.
It's some nasty stuff, but it really gets the job done. So we need to have these. There's water down the hall here, quite unfortunately quite far down the hall. There's our source for clean cold water. Everything we use is cold water, and then we heat that up because cold water in Denmark, well, in a lot of places, is cleaner than hot water is because hot water is usually recirculated. So we just need to have basically X amount of cleaning liquid run through the pump, and then if there is some residue or whatever, just take it with a sponge. Somewhere around here there are gloves. I brought some as well, so we'll figure it out. So that needs to be done before we start out. Then, as soon as that's done, I think we should. Actually, we're quite a lot of people, so people should start milling malt. We have a mill here. Unfortunately, we only have one mill, but I mean, you're strapping lads and ladies, so I think you'll be able to crank out some malt in a hurry. The recipes we're going to be working off of is these. Here you have your malts. All the theory how the brewing and all this stuff is going to be covered. Like I said, we have a lot of logistics right now. All the theory, all these questions you might have around brewing and stuff, we'll cover that later. But I think we should just get going because it is a time-consuming process, and the earlier we start, the earlier we get finished and get here. We're going to have 2 recipes. These are going to be called session IPAs. This is a fairly light, very drinkable IPA. That basically, it's called a session because you can sit down for a whole day in one session and just pour it down, and you can probably get up by the end of it. This is a double IPA, which is more full, more body, more everything, and demands a bit more hops. There's some brutes. So basically, this is a recipe. There's some numbers here. You can see the temperatures here is what you're going for. I'll explain why this is important afterwards. But right now, we need to split somebody up. So a couple of guys, gals, whatever, to sanitize it, and the rest of people kind of help out with milling malts. Once the boilers are sanitized, they should be filled with about 20 liters of water. Yeah, interesting.
What does it call?
This is A-grade chemicals. You go over here and basically just run the pump.
What's inside it?
Sorry?
You know what's inside it?
There's a lot of chlorides. I can give you the compounds, but it's...
I'm a chemist, that's why I'm asking.
Okay, yeah, it's mainly chlorides. It's very alkalic. So it's basically for dissolving the proteins on the whatever organic compound you have. It's quite efficient, actually. Okay, so this is basically what we're going to be doing throughout the whole process. We have the heated water will recirculate over the malt. So the reason why we're doing is to make sure that whatever we have in the loop is now basically dead. That over here. And then we just take the next one with
the same liquid.
Guys. An evil twin that does all the distillery.
Yeah.
He has a magic portal in his kitchen that all of a sudden turns out in Croatia. So
Yeah.
what are the odds, right? Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we should have washed the walls too.
Yeah.
And that too, that's too. Good too.
Good stuff.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, okay. You like that? Yeah, great. Mannequin fish. Thank you. Everybody dance now.
May I take a peek?
Yeah.
That's it.
Take a peek. Okay.
So these are. Ja, jeg tror, at sige så. Ja, præcis. Vi vælger ud af.
Oh, minus 1.3, okay?
Oh, here.
So that's all. Like this. You take this part, it has different sizes and shapes and whatever, but the gist of it is you take this one and put it inside of this one. So. Oh, and then you take the top part off because that's gonna come afterwards. The lid on, because then it's gonna boil faster. Basically, put the spout on, and it'll not go straight, and it has to go in at an angle. Yes. Top part off.
So these parts don't have to be
Sorry.
They don't have to be cleaned.
They're gonna be boiled. They're gonna be boiled.
They're going to be boiled.
The only thing, if there's an organic compound, if there's something nasty inside the pump,
Yeah.
we want to know about it, and the liquid turns green if there is.
Okay, so that's...
Come in, Matt. We'll take that afterwards. So,
With me, who knows the most about a shop out here? Who knows about it? Yeah.
This?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Then you turn on. Plug in.
Du laver 2 gange. Right.
I had one awesome. Så ved man godt, at så bliver det blandet. Helt præcis det alt sammen.
So, repeat after me. Press the left button. It says PCB. The display turns on. I set you up already. Then press manual. So the lower left corner, there's a button. Press that one, and the UI kind of changes. I think. Then you can brief your buddies, basically. So what we're doing here is basically heating malts. Malts. Oh, someone in the bathroom. Yes. So malts. You've seen this stuff. This is basically corn. Corn's grain. Malt is when you take grain, expose it to water, basically let it start to live a little, and then basically kill it. What you do is when you expose it to water, a chemical reaction starts that releases enzymes. Those enzymes is what the plant usually uses to grow. It converts starches to sugars.
Could you shut the door, please?
And, funny, people don't understand that they don't need to shout the distance, they have a phone for that. So it converts starch, stews, into sugars. Those sugars are what the plant usually uses to grow. We're going to cheat it. We're going to steal all those lovely sugars and make beer out of it. In this, there are two main enzymes that work at different temperatures. That's why we have different temperatures here. We have the entry level, which starts out to be affected about 63 degrees. That makes very highly fermentable sugars. That's basically sugars that once the yeast is done with it, there's nothing left but alcohol and CO2. At higher temperatures, you make sugars that are more simple. It's harder for for the yeast to break down. The net gain of doing the processing is not that efficient. Meaning, if you have those sugars, those will, to a higher degree, carry over into the final product. That is what adds mouthfeel, body. Remember, it's kind of like when you make cocktails. Sugar and salt are kind of enhancers of flavor. So if you have a full body thing, that's basically leftover sugars that the yeast couldn't ferment. So that's why we do this. The main issue there is with this, that the two temperatures for the malts, as soon as you go up the ladder of temperature, you destroy the enzymes on the lower scale, basically meaning that you can never go back. If the temperature was too high, you can never go back to the ones that are fermentable. Then you end up with a beer that is very weak and very sweet, basically undrinkable. If you ever had this nisseøl, that is basically what they do. They raise the temperature to a point where the fermentation is very inefficient, and they get away with some of this stuff. Yes, what we're gonna do here, so I'm just gonna prep you for what we're gonna do because we all gathered here anyway. We're gonna measure out the malt that is needed per the recipe. If you can, put a finger in the hole of the pipe. Some of these have an adjustable pipe that is kind of like a telescope thing. Oh, I shouldn't do that. That should be at an angle. Anyway, there's a telescope in here in two of those. Those are the matte ones. These are the newest. There's a telescope thing there. Get it as high as you can. You can always lower it afterwards. But just put a finger in when you pour in the malt, because we don't want to have malt in the bottom, because that's going to get sucked in the pump and it's going to ruin everybody's day. So if you at all can do that, please do that. The order in which the malt comes in doesn't really matter. What we then are going to do is we're going to turn on the pumps that is going to recirculate the water over the malt. Initially, we want to get every grain of malt wet, because it's the temperature and the water that actually starts creating these sugars at different temperatures. So there's unfortunately we only have one big spoon, but share and share alike. So we're gonna have one of the buckets is gonna be where the spoon is gonna live, and it's gonna be here, I think. And then for shorten everything down. The last hop is basically added while you cool things down. It's assumed that the hop here is sanitized enough that we can actually do that. Yes, about malt, some of you guys have been up here smelling these things. This is Pilsner Molds, and this is pale ale malts. They're basically, when they dry the malts, they do it with different levels of heat, basically. So these are basically just been wetted, churned around, and then dried off. This has been added a little bit of heat, and as you can see, this one has been added quite a lot of heat. This is basically used back in the days during the Second World War in Denmark. We couldn't get coffee because that was basically from across a pond. So people would drink basically this stuff burned to a crisp, which this is. This is used for stouts, a very, very dark beer, which is excellent, but is not on a general scale it's not something everybody enjoys, so we're going for the lighter beers. But try and smell these malts and see what the differences are. Some of these you can basically kind of smell sweetness, and so this is caramel, for example. This is more like, has a roasted quality, like toasted bread, and this is more like coffee basically. And you get those by adding those to the mix. You can generate a lot of interesting flavors. Same thing goes for the hops. At some point we're going to open the hops, we might as well do it here now. Most of what we're going for here is American hops. because they're quite potent and have a tendency to have these interesting citrusy, floral, pineapple, mango notes things. I think at some point I'm gonna send a link or whatever, figure out how to share, because, or you can Google them yourselves and figure out what the profile is, because at some point you are gonna design the hop profile for your beer. So what are you going for? It's quite interesting to figure out. Let's see what we have here.
Hvad du laver? Du laver bier, eller den også en pæn? Eller er det smør? Ja.
So there is like a stopper here somewhere actually. I think we lost one in the war. Well, there's a white stopper here that you potentially on these. This, if you have one of these, this replaces a finger. It's quite convenient. It's not as hot for your fingers. There should
Har
be
du
one of
styr på
those.
sikkerhed eller noget?
Okay. So yeah, exactly. Take everything off.
Så får det ikke det.
Og så må man lige holde der.
Skal man holde der?
Ja, det er sådan ikke ryger op. Det var sådan her, det mener.
Ja, præcis. Bare lige sørg for, at du ikke får bare sådan her.
Ja.
For dækkullet, ikke?
Ah! Jeg troede, du havde den.
Nej.
Der ryger lige sådan ned, den her.
Ja, du skal ikke presse på den, du skal bare holde fingeren over. Det er ikke sådan, det er ikke hånd på væggen. Selvom man nu har hørt, det gør bedre øl. Sådan er, lad os bare lige...
Så godt.
Så må vi lige
3,5 kilo.
Ja, det er 79.
Ja, det er risengrød.
Ja, I'm sorry, ja.
Hvad har du den? 30,
Yummy.
Oh, that looks like a porridge.
Hvis den...
Oh, and smells good. Wow.
Der er en bolle i softwaren, så nogle gange har man fået
Så det er ikke mate til i hvert fald.
har et problem med, at vi ikke finde steder,
Ja.
hvor der ikke er mål.
Det var lige 100 gram for lidt. Så det er en stor håndfuld.
Det er også derfor, man har godt at bruge en flaske.
Like so.
De her, og
Fantastisk. Det passer bare helt perfekt.
ja, en anden fed ting, det er, at du har kun
Skal du have 300 gram?
Jesper?
Det må du nok have hjælp til, Jesper.
Yes.
Ja, den skal vi lige trykke lidt ned. Den vender rigtigt, den her, ikke?
Nej, okay, yeah. So the spout needs to go in at an angle. You cannot just have it go straight in. It needs to be turned slightly.
Men det er mere den her.
Yeah.
Den skal vel lidt ned, ikke?
Yeah, so basically you want to just adjust it in such a way that it's just above the mouth.
Okay. Så ned og så måske lidt op eller
Det
hvad?
skal ikke grindes til hen, eller hvad?
Nej, det er grinded.
Det er 300 gram. Ikke?
Yep.
Sådan der.
Actually 200. I just
200?
changed my mind because
Nå, det er 250, kan det gå?
Det kan
Eller skal det ikke tage 50 tilbage?
So,
We start the pump, right?
Yes, you start the pump.
so it is already in 65. So,
It'll drop slightly.
yep. And
Okay,
it,
now
the
you
timer
can
start.
smell. This is the enzymes working. You can smell the smell.
Timer says now 27 minutes. So it's been probably on for a while.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course we put
But
it on.
it was heated, it was the right temperature, so it was not circulated.
So basically, I would start counting now.
Okay.
Basically.
To be exact.
Er I varme?
Wants to see it too.
Of course. So every quarter of an hour.
How does it look like? It looks even more like porridge. But is there like less malt now and more water than it was?
Yeah.
So I take some of the starch has moved to a sugar and melt it into the water or something?
Or mainly just more water being brought to the
Yeah,
top
yeah,
than before. I think that's good. My guess.
Things, and what you do is you look through this at a light source, and that gives you a number for the sugar content. This right now says 1,050. Usually that means if you ferment that, it'll end up with the beer at about 5%.
Decent.